Welcome, everyone, to episode 74 of the Gully Blanchard podcast. My name is Ryan Anderson, coming to you from the continent of California. Still getting into the September month here, so we're trying to have some fun before the wintertime comes and it gets too cold out here in the Bay Area in Northern California. So you can check out all 74 episodes of the Gully Blanchard podcast in multiple areas. Gullyblanchard.podbean.com would be the first one. You can check us out on iTunes at Gully Blanchard. That's GULLYBLANCHARD. You can follow me on Twitter at Gully Blanchard, which same way, GULLYBLANCHARD. You can also check out my wrestling writing and past podcast episodes at No Coast Bias. Shout out to Derek and everyone in Nebraska for definitely taking care of the podcast and all my writing exports over these last couple years. So it's going to be a pretty good show this week. Last week I talked to Keenan Fahey from the Interceptable podcast about, the NFL, Eagles, Bears, Falcons game, stuff like that. We also talked most importantly about his trip to the Muppets exhibit and when he went down to LA. Unfortunately, that's not going to be there when I head down to LA next month. I'm a huge Muppets fan, so that would be something I'd really get a kick out of seeing. But with that being said, this was originally a one-man podcast. Then I brought in two of my best buddies, Ricky and Diddy. Diddy, we love you, man. Get well soon. And, based on sometimes life happens, we decided to go back to a one-man podcast where I just talk to people that, I get along with, I have similar interests with, and we could talk about cool stuff. Since this is kind of my podcast, I make the rules, and I get to talk to people that I find interesting. So without further ado, co-host of the Corner podcast, Kel2, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me, man. It's always nice to get out and make the rounds on the podcast circuit and chop it up. It's always nice. And, man, I just appreciate being here. It's a crazy weekend, especially for me in combat sports. So it's nice to detach a little bit and just get to sit down and talk.
I bet, man. So I know I'm not going to pretend like I am the biggest combat sports fan. I know I get a lot of my information from following you, Andres, and a couple other people. But before we get into this weekend, what is, for those who don't listen, and if you don't listen, you should listen, what is the Corner podcast that you do and where can people check it out?
You can find the Corner podcast on all major platforms. So iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud is the link we always tweet out and send out on social media, but it's available anywhere you listen to music. So Tidal, all of that stuff. We're part of the Loudspeakers Network. It's one of the biggest podcast networks in the United States. Charlemagne has Brilliant Idiots there. The Read is really popular. It's on that network. Horrible Decisions, Angela Yee, so on and so forth. Tax Zone used to be on there, Free Tax. Everyone kind of, it started through there. Combat Jack, rest in peace. He was the originator of the network. So we're on that network. It's great to have that backing behind us. But our podcast specifically is a little bit more niche than the other ones. We're a combat sports podcast. So we talk pro wrestling, MMA, which is UFC. For most people who don't know, like UFC and their smaller promotions we touch on as well. And then we also talk about boxing. So this weekend in particular is one of the biggest boxing matches of the year between Canelo Alvarez and Triple G, Gennady Golovkin, here in Las Vegas. So I'll be attending that. Been going to weigh-ins and doing interviews and so on and so forth. So it's been a very, very busy week in combat sports. So that's what our show is about. But what makes it different is we kind of have like a nice hip-hop perspective to it because that's where we, both started. I grew up in New York in the midst of the hip-hop industry. My entire family is in the hip-hop industry. So, like, my godfather was A&R for Uptown Records and LaFace. My dad has been in the industry his whole life. My uncle was head of the street team at Bad Boy back in the day when street teams were dope. He's been A&R at like D-Block Records. He was at Rough Riders, head of promotions, all of this good stuff. So I grew up in the music industry in the thick of it when I was a youngin'. My co-host Andreas Hale works for several promotions, including Billboard, Grammy, Pitchfork, all of these crazy writing outlets, and he reviews albums and covers things and does amazing work in the music industry. So we came from that background, and we bring that to combat sports. So we'll open up the show talking about current event. Like today's show, we opened it up talking about Nicki Minaj versus Cardi B and throwing a shoe, but we put a combat sports twist on it. So we do a tale of the tape. Who would win, Cardi B or Nicki Minaj? We do the full rundown. Who's the more agile, who got the size advantage. You gotta give the heart and the street advantage to Cardi. So we break everything down. We kind of relate the two areas, so people who aren't into combat sports kind of get like a taste of it with pop culture. And then we also touch on the other current events, so like social issues going on in the country, or Puerto Rico when they had the hurricane. I'm half Puerto Rican. A lot of my family is back in Puerto Rico, so I touched on that and how it affected me and my family who is still there, and how a lot of my family members still don't have power and water. We dive into issues, and those are the openings of all our shows. So, like I tell everyone, like, listen, the Corner Podcast is for everyone. It's a combat sports show, but my mom listens every week. She listens for the first 30 minutes and then goes about her day, because she knows the first 30 minutes we're going to talk about the ratchetness, we're going to talk about the hardcore issues, stuff she can relate to. And then if she doesn't want to listen to us nerd out about pro wrestling, that's fine. So there's something for everyone on the show, man. So I encourage everyone to check it out. It's always fun. It's always a good time. Me and Andreas love talking to new fans. We always interact. And almost 4 years strong we've been going. So I'm proud of it. I'm glad to do that every week. And it's a good outlet for me when I'm not writing and going about the normal life as a journalist.
Yeah, I will say I give you guys a lot of credit, because I'm the first to admit when it comes to boxing and UFC, I am the definition of a casual fan. It's just a couple questions I want to ask you about the upcoming fights in UFC as this progresses. But you guys both do a very good job of making the information digestible, and you guys do a really good job not alienating the casual fan. And I think, especially in pro wrestling, because that's sort of my niche, on social media, and everyone who kind of knows me off Twitter, they always sort of ask me, like, I can't tell you how many random, IMs at work or text messages I get when something big happens, like with Ronda Rousey or The Rock. And, they always ask me, and I'm kind of that point person for a lot of people that are casual WWE fans or fans of the Attitude Era. So, when I try to explain what's going on, I try to explain it in terms to where they don't feel like I'm alienating them. So, maybe that might help spark them in getting back into wrestling. I know when Goldberg came back, I can't tell you how many people were using my WWE Network login to watch, that WrestleMania, and that was all they wanted to watch. But they were excited to have, stuff that they identified with, and they were excited to make it fun for them again. So you guys do a really good job making the information digestible for someone who, like myself, is kind of a casual fan in regards to, boxing or UFC or even Bellator to some extent.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we try to do, man. Make sure that the whole goal here is to elevate the culture, right? That as journalists, that's what we got in it to do. We didn't get in it to be stars or to have fans or to be famous. That's not life as a journalist. You get into journalism to tell the stories of others and to use your talents to make sure the stories of these athletes, of these famous people, of these artists go down in history, and you tell it through your words and your lens. And that's the beauty of journalism. That's the beauty of writers throughout history. Like, I'm a huge fan of the movie Troy. Like, I love like those Greek Odysseys and all that stuff. Those are great stories. Someone had to write that, right? Like, someone wrote the Iliad. That's incredible to me. The hero in the story is great. He had amazing strength and powers and some of the greatest fighters and courage. But the person I remember is the person who wrote it. So that's the pleasure of being a journalist, and podcasts are the same way. We're on here to tell stories and to share this information and create new fans, not for us, but for the sport, for the people we're talking about. And I think we try to do a good job in that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, check you guys out. I think it's something you guys do a really good job, and you guys, to me at least, and I can speak from my perspective, with not being the biggest boxing fan, like, I'm gonna keep my eye on what's going on with that fight this weekend, just because of, or through social media and a couple other people that are, that I follow that are a big fan of it. So it makes it fun, it makes it digestible, and it's something where you guys do a really good job bringing in, fans of all different backgrounds that may not be experts. And I think that's always important, because you never know, who's a new fan of a product that you're responsible for bringing into, like you said, bringing in and elevating that culture.
Exactly. You got to come down to Vegas. We catch a fight together, you're going to be a fan. This is something
Man,
we got to do.
Man, I lived there for 4 years. I was there for 4 years off Sahara and Durango, man. And it is funny because I was watching, I want to say it was, oh, I'm going to get the name wrong. When Pacquiao fought, he lost the decision. It was I want to say, I'm thinking
Timothy
Parker.
Bradley.
That's it. Parker Bradley, close enough. Yeah. And I remember being at my barber's house. He lives kind of by South Point, and I remember I was there watching the fight, and they were doing like the aerial shots of Vegas and all that, and I'm thinking like, this guy's house is 10 minutes from Mandalay Bay, and it just feels like you're on the other side of the world. It was such a different, like I tell people all the time, and I don't think people get it until they actually live in Vegas, that, you know, going to the Strip is like going to a totally different world. Like just you can be so close but feel so far away, and that's how I always felt during big fights. Like I remember when Mayweather would fight there or Pacquiao would fight there, like it felt like I was completely detached from all that, but it was 10 minutes from where I was at the time.
Yeah, you gotta tell people. I live in Vegas. I don't live on the Strip.
Yeah,
there's a difference. And no, when people come out, they always have a blast, and they recognize that. A lot of people end up staying for that same reason. You know, like Vegas is so different. You can go and do the hijinks and the craziness of the Strip, and then you can go home and it feels like an entirely different city. So
yeah,
it's always great.
It was a kick, man. Like anytime I would tell people I live there, they'll always act like it's like, how do you live out there? It's like, I do the same things you guys do every day. You guys just don't have reverse happy hour, and you guys don't have, you know, slot machines in your local Safeway. But other than that, like dry cleaners, gyms, everything.
I go out of town and I'm like, wait, what do you mean this closes at 12?
It was the biggest shock when I moved back to Sacramento. I was like, wait, like there's nothing to do downtown. Like none of these bars are open all night, and like I want to go get like a piece of pizza or go get a beer. And like I remember going to all those PTs with those reverse happy hours that were the causes of many stories in my life. And
those are the nights.
Yeah, those are the nights. We'll leave it just at that. Those are the nights.
Yeah. No, you were living the best life out here.
Man, it was a lot of good stories out there.
That's how you got to do it. Yeah, I remember going to LA when I was like 22. Went out there to cover a fight. I was probably 23 then. I went out there to cover a fight, and a friend was showing me around, and I was like, okay, cool. And they're like, okay, let's go to this club. So we went. We're chilling, and the club didn't look like a club. It looked like a lounge. And I remember the lights came on. I was like, oh, what happened? What's going on? He was like, no, that was last call. I was like, what's last call?
Yeah, what do you mean?
Like I was a weirdo. I was like,
yeah.
What do you mean? What's last call? Like, oh no, that's when there's no more alcohol. Like the club is closing. I was like, what? It's 1:30.
Yeah.
Like, you go to a club in Vegas at 1. Like,
yeah, you leave the house.
Yeah, like clubs close maybe at 5:30. You go to Dre's for the after hours till 9 a.m. You go, you walk out. It's sunny outside. You get some breakfast. Then you go to a day club or you pass out at home. That's it.
That was, yeah, that is so many nights. I remember just coming home at like 2 a.m. being like, I got to be at work in a couple hours. And like, I just got like 4 giant mugs of beer for like $8 at that PT's off Sahara in 215. I'm like, I got to like, yeah, that was a nightly thing out there. And I tell people all the time, like it's a different city because you can do anything like that. Like your wildest night living in another city like Sacramento, you could do that on like a Tuesday in the middle of the week, and people don't even bat an eye. They just look at it like it's any other night, and it's hard to really explain and get a grip of until you actually live there. That's for sure.
I work at Channel 8 at 5:30 tomorrow morning. We're doing this podcast, and it's a little later in the night. We're recording it. You know, people don't know that. So it's like 9 o'clock at night. After this, I'm getting in the shower, getting dressed, going out to the bar. It's random Thursday.
Yeah.
Going out to the bar, coming home at like 1:30, waking up at 4:30-ish, going to work.
That's how it was Vegas. Too many nights out there. Yeah. It's a fun city, man. I actually want to get into something that's going on in Vegas this weekend. The Triple G Canelo fight. I know, again, I'm a casual fan, so I'm going to rely on you to kind of fill in the gaps here. What is this fight for boxing? I know there's this one. I know there's a big heavyweight fight that could be coming, but as a boxing fan or a big fan of that sport, what does this fight mean to you? What is this? How would you describe this fight?
Man, the importance of this fight for me as a hardcore boxing fan lies in the fact that these guys aren't signed to the same promotion. A lot of people see these big fights go on, and people know Mayweather, of course, even the casual fans. And a lot of times, Mayweather, his star was so great that other promotions would work with them in hopes of building their guy into a star. But that wasn't the case across boxing. If you weren't signed to the same promoter, if you weren't both signed to HBO or both signed to Showtime, it was very rare do these guys fight each other. In this case, we get to see not only once but twice Canelo and Triple G fight each other, despite having two different promoters, despite being on two different networks for the majority of their careers. It's very, very rare that we see these things come to fruition, and come to fruition when fans want them. Mayweather fought Pacquiao, but that was after 7-8 years. They had to go back and forth to work with each other because they were in different promotions. And Canelo and Triple G seem to have happened in a year and a half. As you know, boxing grows, hopefully it opens the door for more fighters to do this instead of just talking about doing it. There's two really good heavyweights right now, Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder. They look like they're on a collision course. They were supposed to fight this winter. Fights keep getting pushed back because it's hard to work between promoters. Hopefully fights like this start the trend to say, you know what? There's room enough for us both to get money. We can both get pay-per-view fights. We both have stars. Let them see who the best fighter in the world is instead of fans guessing for 5 years. And we do this at the end of their twilight of their careers. So that's what the fight means to me. The first one was exciting. Two heavy-handed fighters, two fighters that don't care too much about defense. They're going to go in there and they're going to slug it out. A ton of knockouts on both of their resumes. They weren't able to knock each other out, but trust me, a lot of those bombs should have knocked one of them out. They've knocked out a lot of people with those same punches. So this time you go in and you hope to see that knockout. And if you don't, you're going to get 12 rounds of offense, of just nonstop punches and body blows and hooks and uppercuts. And it's an amazing, amazing style of boxing. It's less Floyd Mayweather sweet science, more bite down on the mouthpiece and just brawl. And for casual fans, this is the type of fight you want.
So if I'm a casual fan, say I'm a basketball fan, is this sort of similar from an offensive standpoint to like watching those 7 seconds or less Suns against another high-scoring offense where you just know there's not going to be a lot of scientific defense? These guys are just going to try to, in that analogy, outscore each other, but in boxing, just sort of outslug each other, so to speak?
I would say the easiest way to break it down for a basketball fan, right? Say you're a fan of the NBA. Mm-hmm. This fight is watching Golden State versus Houston.
Okay.
Where both teams are offensive, right? You know you're not going in for defense.
Yeah.
But their offense is so technically sound and beautiful. And the ball movement and Houston's ISO ball, where it's still the pick and rolls, and it's like D'Antoni's running it with two Steve Nashes, and you get the best of what ISO ball can be, and the pick and pop and the three-pointers, and it's just flowing, and the short shot clock and shooting it within 7 seconds. Then you get Golden State and Kerr-style offense, where it's ball movement, and you have people just catching and shooting, and you come down and you can pull up from three, get the long rebound, and kick it back out. Klay Thompson doesn't even dribble. It's two different styles of offense, but they're both high scoring and they're both technically sound and beautiful. It's not clumsy and just running up and down the court. It's everything was with a purpose, and it's amazing to watch. And the game might be 145 to 137, but you got your money's worth. That's this boxing match. It's offensive, but it's not sloppy. They're not throwing haymakers from the ankles. They're not just chucking it up. They're going in there, and each punch, each movement, offensively, the way their feet slide, like hardcore boxing fans still feel a great attachment because they can break down the technical aspects. But the fists are flying the entire time. Mayweather was defensively technical, and it bored people to death because his job was not to get hit. These guys use those same skills and the same athleticism and the same technique and the same footwork to land punches, and that's what makes it great.
So is this when you said this is sort of where they're rival? They're from different promotions. Is this sort of like for a WWE fan? Is this sort of like say like a Seth Rollins and Kenny Omega, both guys in different promotions right now? Seth in WWE, Kenny in New Japan. Them sort of coming together to where both wrestling companies are going to get money and they're going to promote this huge fight together, hoping that this may end up getting us, say, Roman Reigns and Okada down the road. But from a boxing standpoint, is that similar? Am I getting that correctly from you?
Exactly. That is what it's like. You put your differences aside for the greater good. You guys share the money. There's always an A side and B side. Obviously, Kenny Omega might be the better fighter, but he's not going to be the A side of that fight, that wrestling match. So Vince McMahon is like, listen, I'm taking 70% of this money, and we'll give Omega 30 because it's New Japan. But you get the fight done. You get the match done. And that's what these boxers have to do. And it's good for the sport. It'd be great for wrestling. Like, and it doesn't have to happen all the time. But these type of fights, if you tell me 4 times a year, you guys are willing to work together, and we get, 3 or 4 times where we might send a New Day to New Japan to crash it, and they have a match with the Young Bucks. Okay, and then you know what? We're going to send the Golden Lovers over from New Japan, and they're going to take on Ambrose and Rollins.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had these little matchups. You know what? We'll go champion versus champion. You want to go Golden Boy versus Golden Boy? We'll go Reigns versus Okada. And we saw that with Jericho a little bit. He dipped his toe in the water. He's like, you know what? I'm a vet. I'm kind of free to do what I want. Let me just dip my toe in the water and see how good this is. And it works out. So instead of people doing this on their own accord, imagine if you just work together to do it. Same thing. Cody had to be cut to go and do it. Cody Rhodes, it just blew up over there. He was a D player on the WWE roster.
Yeah.
He was low ball. Like, Stardust was low on the roster.
He was a main eventer.
Star. Yeah. Imagine if you actually send your stars over there.
Mm-hmm.
What a concept. Your D-level players, people you cut, people you let go over there and can become stars. Imagine if you actually sent the people you cared about occasionally to wrestle over there. How crazy would that be? So it's a concept that in boxing works the same. You know what? Sometimes you're the better fighter. Sometimes you got to come up and give up a little bit of money to cross-promote. But if you beat them, you believe you're the better boxer, you're going to take their star power with you. And that's what the risk reward is. That's what Triple G is doing. A lot of people are like, oh, Triple G, he doesn't speak English that much. Oh, he got a lot of knockouts. Casuals kind of notice him every now and then. But you know what? Canelo took his star from Mayweather. People didn't know who Canelo was from the guy walking down the street. He fought Mayweather, Canelo. And
that's how I knew who he was.
Pay-per-view all the time, right? And then, cool, he got his star, even in the loss, from fighting Mayweather. His star came from just being in the same ring. Casuals knew him. They latched on. Because they saw, okay, I know Mayweather. Okay, I know De La Hoya. Oh, this guy is attached to both of them somehow. Boom, he's a star. And now Triple G is doing the same. You know what? I want to fight him. Why? Because everyone knows Canelo. Now people get to know Triple G a little more. And that's how you got to do it. You build stars upon stars. And you know what? If your guy's good, he's going to go out there and win. End of the day, he goes out there and win. No harm, no foul. Canelo just has to go out there and win. Nothing but positives go toward his record. If he loses, it gets a little shaky. But that's what sports are. At the heart, you want to see the best compete against the best in some shape, form, or fashion. And boxing, this fight gives hope that it can go there.
Now, is that a similar situation with the 2 heavyweights you mentioned with Joseph and Wilder? Is that sort of the difference in promotions was keeping that fight from happening?
Yes. I'd say it's a little, I don't want to say it's easier because obviously there's little differences still to get over. But it's still easier to make than most of these fights that we see kept apart. A lot of times, one fighter's on HBO, one fighter's on Showtime, which are the major networks. Other times, there's like 2 major companies at this moment, Top Rank, which is the HBO side, and PBC, which is the Showtime side. So those 2 promoters don't like each other, so that gets a little dicey. The heavyweights, we don't have that problem. Anthony Joshua is on DAZN now. But his promoter is pretty much for all purposes independent. So if they wanted to put on a pay-per-view, they could just do Showtime pay-per-view. No problem. It's not like he's running away from HBO. Their bigger fights have been on Showtime sometimes. So they have a working relationship with the companies and the networks, which make it easier. The biggest deal is who gets more money. Anthony Joshua obviously is going to get more, but Deontay Wilder feels like he deserves a nice piece of the pie. I think he's going for like a 60-40 split. He'll take the 40. When he started going 70-30, he's a champion in his own right. He has feelings too.
Gotcha.
And then, where the fight is. Anthony Joshua is from London. He is an Olympic gold medalist. He's the pretty boy in the fight. He's the A-side. He fights in London all the time at the O2 Arena, and he puts 85,000 people in there. He has pyro like his WrestleMania. It's a huge production in England. They don't have pay-per-view overseas. For that to sell on pay-per-view here in the States, it'd be at 4 p.m. West Coast time. Not even. I think it's 4 p.m. East Coast time, 1 p.m. West Coast time.
I think it is.
So hard to do that. So hard to do that on pay-per-view. But like the pay-per-view aspect, of it though is what drives stuff in the United States. So Deontay Wilder wants to get paid a little more. He wants that here. He wants pay-per-view points. He wants pay-per-view money. Anthony Joshua doesn't want to come to the States. He doesn't want to fight in Vegas. So it's these little things that are going into it. We'll see. Something's going to give. People want it enough. There's enough money behind it. Something's got to give. I think it happens in London. I think if there's a rematch, it happens in Vegas. Everyone wins. So it's an interesting point, but the future of boxing is fine. There's plenty of big fights. We just have to make sure all these promoters play nice.
So I want to get into something you talked about briefly a second ago with Cody, and he obviously left WWE and is doing his thing in New Japan and did his thing with All In. What were your thoughts on the All In concept or the pay-per-view in itself? Did you get a chance to watch it? What were some of your takeaways? Because I've heard mixed reactions from a lot of different people, either online or in casual conversations. So I'm just interested to see how you absorbed watching or following the All In event.
Oh yeah, I watched it. Not only for the podcast, it was like the biggest wrestling event of that weekend, but just as a fan, I watched it, and I understand where people are coming from if they have mixed feelings about it. It was a pay-per-view with no purpose, right? People love New Japan. People love WWE. I mean, if you love WWE or you criticize it, regardless. But you do it because of the storyline. As an adult, you do it because you can fantasy book and you want to see where this person goes. And you want to say, this is great booking, this is bad booking. It's like that. It's a giant soap opera, but it's one that you feel like you want to control. It's the perfect mesh between soap opera and sports. This pay-per-view had no payoff. There was nothing. It changed nothing, really. There was one title defended, or two, but the other one didn't change hands. And the one that did, Cody won it, and it's a championship that isn't attached to a promotion. It's hardly ever defended. So it was just more nostalgia. It was to see if they can host their own pay-per-view and carry it on the strength of it. They made a lot of money. The YouTube series that they have, Being the Elite, really carried the narrative for a lot of these matches that went on that night. There was some good, there was some good twist in it. I think they'll learn from it because the timing was a little off. So the main event got like 12 minutes when 3 matches before we had Marty Scurll versus Okada that got like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So the timing was a little off. And when you're dealing with pay-per-view, you got to be precise and they're going to cut you off. And you got to get off on the right time.
Mm-hmm.
You have to learn how to balance these things. These are things that, the WWE has decades of experience doing and the money to pay to run over. These guys don't, and they're learning. They're learning on the fly. They're learning how to produce a show. So it was great on all ends. You know what? They made it work. At the end of the day, they pulled it off, and it's the first one. If they want to go and keep doing it, and they don't want to go back to WWE, that's their prerogative. Young Bucks have never been, but if they want to stay there and promote their own shows and just be happy, they'll make enough money to do so. My argument's always, you go to the WWE. Not because that you can make more money, which you can, because you really can't control your star there. You can't control your character. Someone else is always booking you. You never have the control you can have on the indies. But you go there so your name lasts forever. Your legacy lasts forever. You have toys, you have action figures, you have video game characters, you have these things where generations of kids remember you. The NWA is great. The AWA is great. All these smaller promotions where all of these WWE guys, Ric Flair, all these people, Hulk Hogan, where they came from. But we know them because of WWE and to a somewhat lesser degree, WCW. And
Yeah,
that's why these people live forever. That's why we have Stone Colds and the Rocks and Hogans and the biggest names, the most transcendent names, the ones that will live 300 years from now, sadly, aren't the guys in New Japan. They aren't.
yeah, I know. When I was kind of going through All In, I had a kind of a two-prong thought process of it. I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest Cody fan as far as his in-ring work. I think it's solid, but I don't
You're better than me. I dislike it with a passion.
yeah, like I don't think it's bad. And I think a lot of times in wrestling, something either has to be really, really good or it has to be really, really bad. I don't get either from Cody. So like I looked at All In, like I'm not the biggest, indie wrestling fan. Like I can't tell you what GZW is doing, in Washington DC on a Friday night at, Hell in this their version of Hell in a Cell. Like I don't follow it enough. I have a hard enough time following WWE and New Japan. But I was happy to see an American alternative in a sense to where I think that All In, and I've been very careful on how I've described this. I think All In has the ability to be what ECW was in, not in the hardcore sense or not in the star making sense, but you have a pocket of wrestling fans that get on their phones and they do the kind of, they get on the Twitter, they get on, their outlets and they criticize the product for hours and hours and hours. And, they all tell you how much they hate Roman Reigns and how this guy is being underused and what have you. And I think what All In gives them is it gives them an alternative in America. Because I think that's what's helping New Japan right now is that fans want different when it comes to wrestling. When wrestling was at its point, there were options. And I don't think in America right now there are a lot of options for wrestling fans in the sense to where like there's Progress, it's in the UK. There's Ring of Honor, but if I was to quiz you right now, how many Ring of Honor stars can you name? That list can't terribly be that long for a lot of mainstream fans. So I think if All In did nothing else, it gives fans in the United States the same sort of alternative that ECW did, where you have like, well, we're tired of Roman Reigns and we want to, be a fan of this underground independent thing they want to be a part of the groundswell. Like you want to be a fan of Talib Kweli when he's making Train of Thought. You know what I mean? Like you want to get in on the ground floor of that. And I think that's what All In represented. Like I watched bits and pieces of it through, YouTube and GIFs and whatever. And I thought it was fun for what it is. I saw Cody winning the NWA title a mile away, which is cool. Like, I get what he's doing. I can't say that I would pay to watch Cody Rhodes wrestle. I saw him wrestle in the New Japan show that came out to San Francisco. I wasn't terribly blown away. I thought he put on a good match. But I like the fact that now fans have an alternative in the States that it adds another plate to the buffet of wrestling.
Yeah, that's always good. You always want alternatives. You always want the WWE to be pushed to a degree. You want them to feel as though they have to get better and they can't be comfortable and they have no competition. I mean, you look, the best era of the WWE to most fans is the Attitude Era, right? Like that's when people thought it was at its zenith, its height. And why? Because they were pushed by WCW. They had constant competition week in, week out. And, it'd be great. I'm not sure if it's possible, but it'd be great for them to feel that about New Japan, about ROH. And events like All In are offspring of those companies. Yes. And we'll see New Japan and ROH team together for an all in style show. I think it's G1 Supercard, in New York for WrestleMania weekend, and
Mhm.
it's going head to head with NXT, and they sold out. NXT is going to sell out. Like, there's plenty of options for wrestling fans, and at the end of the day, that's the best time because
Yes.
you can like both. There's a large section of people who feel that they have to choose my WWE and my indie and my New Japan. Like, listen, you can like both. It's fine, and you can dislike parts of both. That's
Mhm.
also fine. The key is that we need both.
Yeah.
As long as you're okay with that, then we're good.
Yeah, and I think that was something that, I tell people all the time. Like, I think I look at, the Attitude Era kind of the same way I look at a lot of Eminem music. Like, a lot of that stuff, if you go back and listen to like a whole Eminem CD, like the Slim Shady LP, it doesn't really age that terribly well. Like, there's only so many songs you could hear about him killing his wife or him doing, 50 pills and all this and that.
I
Like,
personally still like the Slim Shady LP, but I get what you're getting at.
yeah, no, like I mean, I believe you me, I was the biggest Eminem fan in high school. Like, I had all the shirts from Hot Topic and I had all that stuff. But you go back and listen to it, it doesn't hold up as well as I think we romanticize it with. And I think the same with the Attitude Era. Like, I I think the Attitude Era had the most interesting characters. I'm personally a fan of this era as far as an in-ring product.
Oh,
Also,
easily. This is the best in-ring wrestling we've gotten ever. As
yes.
far as a consistent basis and people with the ability to wrestle, this is the best wrestling product in ring we've ever seen. And I don't know how people could even doubt that.
And I think, like, I know we follow each other on Twitter, and I've been watching old Monday Night Raws from episode 1 to, I think I'm on like mid September 2003 now. But that 2002 to 2005 product from SmackDown was my favorite to go back and watch, on par with where they're at right now. Now, the characters weren't as interesting. I'm a huge Benoit fan, regardless of if you can still be a Benoit fan now.
He's in my top five still. I mean, I
Yeah,
just can't. I saw it with my two eyes. It's like when people try to take away the Reggie Bush USC national titles. No, I saw it. That team was incredible. No, you can't take it away. Like, and I can't do the same for Benoit. Like, he is that good.
yeah, and like I can watch his Royal Rumble matches against guys like Angle or Jericho or the Royal Rumble he won. Like, that era from like WrestleMania 17 to WrestleMania 20, I think SmackDown had some of the best in-ring product of all time. I think the Attitude Era had the best characters. Like, obviously you've got, Austin, you've got Rock, you've got, Taker, you've got, Triple H, you've got the end of Shawn Michaels until the comeback. And, you've got something where everyone matters. And I think that's something they're missing right now, as far as they don't have a lot of interesting personalities. I think that's kind of by design. But I want to tie all that back to All In, to where I think WWE in itself is such a brand. Like, they're on ESPN, they're getting Connor's Cure money, they're going to Saudi Arabia, they're going to the motherland in Australia pretty soon. They're doing all these things, so I don't think you can get them to go back to an edgy product. But if nothing else, my whole goal for All In, and the way I'll measure that as a success, is if they're forced to be more creative with the takeover at the Barclays, because they know they're competing with that ROH New Japan show. If I can get the sense after watching it that these guys knew they had to put on a better product because they knew they had that competition that specific weekend, then to me is when it's a success, where you're pushing WWE to make a better product. And that's what I think ECW did, and WCW. I think those companies made Vince change his direction. I don't think that, Cody and Ring of Honor are going to make them change the product, but I hope, if nothing else, they make the product improve.
Yeah, I mean, to me, those guys, ECW, WCW, made the WWE change their characters. They
Yes.
made them say, you know what? We need edgier characters. We need more real life characters. We have to ditch these comic book like dreams. They're the Ultimate Warriors, the Undertaker. So an extent, but Undertaker was just transcendent. But they wanted guys like Stone Cold. He's a
Mm-hmm.
workman. Like, he's a normal dude. We need see someone like this. The Rock. He's flashy, but he's a normal guy. He's not a superhero. He's not, Rocky Maivia with the stupid tassels and all this stuff. There's no Tatankas. No, we want normal people with just real life storylines. Like your dad is broke and all the stuff that Dusty was doing, that Ric Flair was doing. These were large in life characters, but they were real characters, just amplified. There's rich people. You just amplify rich people to an exaggerated level. There's poor people. You amplify that. Whatever you are, just amplify it, and that's good enough. And I think that's what they showed. You know what? You need a little more reality. And then they took it over the top, which was great, though. But that's what they needed at the time. This era, New Japan's ROH, and their success can push them the same way in ring.
Yes.
So the booking can stay the same. Like, the booking's kind of bad, but you know what? At least give us good matches. The change is these promotions are pushing you to not have 5-minute blow off whack matches anymore and talk for the other 45 minutes of Monday Night Raw. You now have to open up, and you better give us 22, 25 minutes or something. You got to let these guys actually wrestle, go in ring, and that's the change. Women can't do bra and panties matches anymore. I'm sorry, it's over. They got to wrestle. You better give Sasha and Charlotte 30 minutes and the same exact matches you give the men. Like, this is the transition that we see from the indies, and that's the new wave push. It's these guys are actually going to have to perform in ring. So I'm sorry, Big Cass, you're cut. I'm sorry, Enzo, you can't make it. There are no Rybacks. You know what? If you want to be a monster, you better be a monster and be able to go.
Like Braun.
Like Braun. The Brock Lesnar's of the world are gone.
Thank God.
You got to be able to go with AJ Styles. You got to be able to wrestle. And that's why NXT is so great, because NXT says, you know what? We're developing the characters and look and everything you need on main roster, but at the end of the day, you still got to wrestle. And everyone at an NXT TakeOver is going to give you 20 minutes, and it better be good.
That's one thing about those NXT shows that I think are different. And I understand the difference. You know, NXT doesn't have a responsibility to sponsors. They don't have a responsibility to engage the customer for, 2 hours, 3 hours, like Raw or SmackDown. So I get that. I just feel like NXT, you know, at the TakeOver that you're gonna get. Like, I can't remember many bad TakeOver matches. Like, I think someone had posted like a clip of Enzo having a bad match at like a fatal 4-way TakeOver. But other than that, like, you go into those takeovers, and I think the common thread on social media is like, damn, SummerSlam has to top that. Or like, damn, like WrestleMania has to top, Ciampa and Gargano. And I don't know if they're going to be able to do it. And I think that's something that has really set NXT apart, to where like you feel like you're going to get great matches and believable, simple storylines that are easy to follow.
Yeah, and that's great. And it's great that the WWE can give you that, right?
Yes.
Like, it's great that, you know what, they listened enough for Vince McMahon to say, you know what, Trips, do whatever you want down there. And if people want the WWE mold still and want a little bit of indie feel, boom, NXT is perfect. It's more accessible than New Japan. You don't have to buy New Japan World. You don't have to go through torrents. You can find it just as easy by getting the network, $9.99. You watch the pay-per-views on there anyway. Cool. And you can digest that little bit of the indie style on there. So when people get, curious, hey, where did Kevin Owens come through? Where did Nakamura come from? Why is he such a big deal? What is with Finn Balor and this demon character? Like, why does this feel so special? You go back, you watch NXT, when you hear about the women's revolution. Oh, Sasha has an epic match in NXT. Let me go check out her versus Bayley. Why is this a storyline? And people go back and they watch these things, and it's accessible. And that's, to me, NXT is the perfect medium. They give you exactly what you want from the indie feel, but it's big time WWE production. And that's a lot of guys who have graduated through the indie system. You're not going to be in NXT anymore if you can't wrestle.
Yeah.
It's just not happening. You can be the greatest character in the world. You ain't making it if you can't wrestle. And a lot of those guys can wrestle.
And I think that's what makes NXT, Raw, and SmackDown so much fun, to where I remember what match I was watching. Oh, it was Owens and Rollins, where like Owens quit and then he was back like a week later or something. And just that match alone, that match was so interesting to me because, in the Attitude Era, that would have been a classic, that would have been that's like a once in a that's not a regular style match you would see in different eras. But that match comes on Raw this year, and it's like, oh man, that's an excellent match. Oh, there's going to be another excellent match like later on that night, and it's just so interesting how deep that roster is of guys that can go in the ring, guys and girls can go in the ring, 25, 30-minute, 3-segment matches, and it seems like every week they're outdoing each other. And I think we're going to look back at this time in WWE and say, like, okay, we don't really remember the characters as well. Like, you can't really remember one good Finn Balor promo or, you know, one great Braun Strowman storyline yet. But, man, you got to go back and watch that Finn Balor versus AJ Styles or, you know, that Finn Balor versus Roman Reigns. Like, those matches are pay-per-view quality matches every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday on Raw, NXT, and SmackDown.
Yeah, I mean, I just saw Cien Almas versus Daniel Bryan. Like, it's incredible. This is matches that were dreamt of 10 years ago. And trust me, 10 years ago, the quality of the WWE was quite poor.
The tout era.
Yeah, it was horrible. And when people heard the pipe bomb by CM Punk and everything, and they said, wow, it's never going to change and all this stuff. Look, those people in 2008, 2009, 2010, hardcore fans would have killed for this main roster today. When you look at a guy like Cien Almas, who was in CMLL, which is a Mexican independent promotion, doing huge things, partnering with New Japan. So the young kids from New Japan went there. So you get the Naitos from New Japan, who has a completely Mexican gimmick. Why? Because he went down there as a young lion and joined the same crew as Almas, who was also like 21 years old. And they create these great things. And you say, you know what? We're never going to see this. I'm never going to see this guy in the WWE. And then you do. And then now fans are upset about it. It's like, no, we're not getting exactly what we want. Sure. You're not going to get them in a gymnasium, so it's just for you, only for you, and you feel special. This isn't going to feel like PWG with 300 people in a smelly gym, and you're up on the ring because there's no separation between fans and apron, and you get that special feel. No, it's not going to be that. But it's a lot better than what it could be. Yeah, like
that's just me. Like, I don't want that.
But people are selfish. Like, people want their independent rappers to always be underground independent rappers. Right?
Yeah, it's the damnedest thing in the world.
How cool is J. Cole and Kendrick now? Like, it's cool to follow, but really, are they the same? Is it Section 80? Is it, a dollar in a dream?
That's like, I was drawing a blank on the name of it too, and I'm thinking like, what is it? Is it School like Days or yeah?
A dollar, like Mac Miller's great, but is it Kids?
Yeah,
like people romanticize these things, and you touched on that, the nostalgia, and they want that something is just for me, and no one knows about it. Yeah. So when they blow up, it's not as cool, and a lot of people spend their entire time chasing that. Okay, what's the next new thing? Oh, New Japan's the next new thing. What happens when New Japan gets so big they go commercial? What happens when New Japan is WCW?
And then what's funny? It's the same thing. It's like, oh man, this Okada match sucks, or like it's the same guy you wanted to blow up, and it is. It's the damnedest thing in the world to me because, like, you want your thing to be successful until it becomes successful, and then when it becomes successful, it stops being your thing. It stops being, it starts being everyone's thing, and you lose sort of that feeling of like, this is mine, it belongs to me, and like, I don't know, maybe I'm in the minority to where like there's a couple indie promotions out here in Northern California, and like there's just nothing about it. Like I just don't enjoy stuff like that. Like I went to one to see MVP and see a couple other guys, but I was there with my fiance and we were watching the show, and I'm like, yeah, this isn't like, I don't love this just because it's independent wrestling.
Yeah, like to me, I like the aspects of independent wrestling that you can't get on a major field, which now it bleeds into it a little bit. But there's still the things like me and my fiance go to WrestleMania every year. When we went the first time, I took her and we went to all of the house shows, right? Because they all go there. We saw Evolve, and we saw one night. I think the main event was Ricochet versus Zack Sabre Jr. And then on the same card, it was Keith Lee versus whoever NXT just signed, King of the Bros.
Riddle.
Matt Riddle. Yeah. So Matt Riddle versus Keith Lee the same night. And then, man, I think we have Marty Skrull come back that same night. All of these guys who are huge names now in major promotions, we saw 3 years ago in Dallas at WrestleMania, and we saw them in a barbecue shack.
Yeah,
with a ring in the middle, and people
was
had
the
people
I
had
assume the
chants
food
for
was
all of
good
them.
though.
Yeah, the food was bomb,
Okay.
but people had chants for all of them.
Yeah.
And the Marty Skrull, the villain, and the whoop whoop. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
had that then. You go for a 3 count, you kick out at 2, and then you go 1, 2, sweet, and then
Mm-hmm.
you get the one fall. You get all of these things that were built in the indies, and you get these chants and these movements. And with Matt Riddle, you get the King of the Bros and bro chants, and you just feel the place rocking, and that's great. That's like the independent hip hop shows. But I also still love to go see Jay-Z. Like,
Yeah.
I'll go watch Jay-Z on the Run tour in the stadium. But I also want to see Joe Budden in a dingy shack. Like, everyone has those two different sides. Like, they're both really, really good. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's where pro wrestling is now. That's always great. You don't want hip hop went through the same thing, right? It was a point in like 2004 through 2006 where Nelly changed the game,
Yeah.
and it was too much like Soldier Boy and D4L and Hurricane Chris, and that was it for
Franchise
a
boys.
second. Yeah, like that was it. That was the only thing getting played,
Mm-hmm.
and that was horrible. And that's what the WWE went through. It was the point where it was only WWE, and it was bad for the product.
That was
But
the
guess what?
great Khali Championship years.
Yeah, like when you start getting backpack rappers again, when you get the blog era and you get the YouTube guys, so you get the Mac Millers, you get the Wiz Khalifas, you get J. Cole and all of these guys, Wale, Currency, all these guys came up, and it was like, you know what, they're cool, and if they blow up, that's fine, but they created another era, and there's always now an undercurrent of, okay, there's good hip hop, there's bad hip hop, you can like both, you can follow whatever you want. And wrestling's the same way. You know what? There's good wrestling. There's bad wrestling. There's talented people in each bracket. People don't like Big Sean sometimes. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, he's going commercial, all this stuff. Yeah, you know what? I still think Big Sean is dope. Is he still mixtape Big Sean? Probably not.
Well, I don't know who is though. Like, you look at that kind of stuff. Like, I know I'm 34 now, and I think Kendrick, like, I got put onto Kendrick around the time I was about 27, 28 years old. And I think we have this weird thing as fans of artists or fans of wrestlers where, like, we expect their goals to stay the exact same in life, but we want ours to be different. And what I mean by that is, like, the same thing. Like at WrestleMania 31, there were a ton of indie wrestlers that I saw that are in NXT or are, at WrestleMania. And, like, I'm happy for them. Like, I'm happy that Currency is, blowing up, or I'm happy that Kendrick, is at the Grammys or what have you. Like, I just don't understand why we have these people that we claim to be such big fans of. Like, for example, a Big Sean, or, why wouldn't you want him to go commercial? Because if you're really a fan of the artist, like you claim to be, and you're going to support him, and you're going to buy, like, the pro wrestling t-shirts, and you're going to check out the podcast, and you're going to donate to the Patreon, like, why wouldn't you want that same guy to go to WWE and get all the money in the world? It's a real weird dichotomy that I think certain fans have.
I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. I love Loudspeakers Network. I love Spotify. I love SoundCloud. I love being able to give people the podcast for free. But if someone shows up at my door and says, hey, Kel, Andreas, we're going to give you Joe Budden money to be exclusive to Spotify or to Tidal, I'm taking the bag.
Yeah, you can't keep it real and pay the rent at the same time, man.
Yeah,
I can't go to my landlord and be like, yo, I don't got rent. Hey, but I kept it real, though. And, like, you know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't work that way. And I don't understand, like, why certain fans wouldn't want their guy. Like, why wouldn't you want Matt Riddle in WWE making all the money in the world, living a better quality of life? Like, that's what you're supposed to do.
Do you understand the quality of ganja Matt Riddle can get now?
Yeah.
No more trash weed for Matt Riddle. He's going to the finest dispensaries now with that NXT money. Let him live his best life.
Same thing with, like, Carl Anderson and Gallows. Like, the main thing that I hear about those guys is, like, oh, they're being booked properly. I wish it was the Machine Gun and all that. And, like, yeah, cool. Like, I think Carl Anderson's a main event talent. I think he's one of the more underutilized guys in the company. But to me, like, this dude gets to see his wife and kids more. cool. Like he's making more money. He's traveling the world. He gets to see his wife and kids more than he did in Japan. Like, dope. Like, I'm happy for him because that's what you grind for. Like, that's why you play those clubs.
The biggest thing is his wife and kids get to see him.
Yeah.
People, that's the biggest knock. People are like, oh, Kevin Owens this, Kevin Owens this. Yes, you know what? He did great stuff in ROH. He could have been great in New Japan. And guess what? His son could have hunted him down. He said, my dad's a pro wrestler. And all his friends at school would have been like, yeah, where does he wrestle? And then they would have never known, oh, yeah, you're lying. Your dad's not a wrestler, blah, blah. Now he goes to school and he says, my dad's a wrestler. Really? Yeah, he's on Monday Night Raw tomorrow.
Here's his action figure.
Yeah, here's his action figure. Yeah, my dad wrestled John Cena last week.
Yeah.
And that's dope. You can provide that. People, it's so weird. Like, I'm not sure if my kids are at the age, but I think they kind of understand it. Because, I mean, I have like 13, 11, and 9. So I have a teenage daughter, pretty much. So it's like she kind of now understands, like, yo, dad does something that's not necessarily normal. So I have like my fiance built like an entire like rack of my credentials going up to my loft. And you see, like, I have over 300 credentials from all the fights I've been at, all the events, Super Bowls, NBA Finals, all this stuff. And my kids just walk past it like it's every normal day things.
Yeah.
Like, my daughter one time tried to put on all of them around her neck as she could. And she doesn't know any different. She just knows that's dad. And, but I think like they kind of get it. Like the Conor McGregor documentary that came out and it's on Netflix and all that stuff. Like, my voice is at the end. I'm asking Conor a question. I made the cut in a movie.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, dad, that's your voice. And it's like, yeah, it's on Netflix. And they're kind of like, oh, wait, that might be a little different. Or when I ask like questions at the NBA Finals, I'm like, dad, that's you on ESPN talking to LeBron. Yes. That's when it sinks in. And like, and for me, whatever. I can ask questions at indie wrestling shows here in Vegas. I can ask questions to LeBron in the finals. To me, it's all the same. When I see my kids' reaction, that's dope. Mm-hmm. When other people can react to what I do, that's cool. And that's where these wrestlers are going with the WWE. And it's crazy that some people don't support it. But you know when you support it? When you do the same thing in your life. When you're no longer a cynic. When you, in your life, whatever career you choose, feel that same sort of justification, then you understand where they're coming from. You can kind of relate to them.
Absolutely, man. So I want to get out of here on 2 questions real quick. I know Hell in a Cell is coming up this weekend. Look, there's 500 wrestling podcasts and there's 500 blog sites. Kel and I both contribute to both of those. So if you want to get a preview to the show, check one of those out. I'm not really here to do the preview show, but I do want to ask you, do you have a favorite Hell in a Cell match?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be taboo. Or, you know, status quo, should I say, not taboo. I don't want to be status quo. But, of course, mine is Undertaker versus Mankind.
Mm-hmm.
Mankind got thrown off at the top of Hell in a Cell. I remember the first time I showed my fiance that match. Mankind, Undertaker, Hell in a Cell. It's probably the first time I saw her genuinely like a wrestling match.
Yes.
Where she was just like, oh, I can't believe this just happened.
Mm-hmm.
I think we had to rewind the first part 3 times. Because Mankind goes through the table within the first 5 minutes. She's like, it's over.
Yeah, he's dead.
That's it.
Yeah.
He's dead. And then they wheel him back a little bit, and he gets up, and Undertaker on the top of the cell looking down like, are you kidding me? And Mankind climbing the cell all the way back up, and then keep going. It's incredible. The image at the end, Mankind losing, but holding the bottom of the ropes, and his tooth is in his nose, through his beard. Like, you don't get that every day. The guy gave up years of his life. I've seen him at WrestleMania like 2 years ago. He could barely walk. He got like a club foot.
Yeah.
He gave years off of his life for matches like that. And that match forever will stick. There will never, and I can say that easily, never be a Hell in a Cell like that match.
I sure hope not.
Ever again. No, like you literally got to die to make it better than that. Yeah.
I know for me, I kind of lean towards Brock and Taker in 2002 during Brock's first run as champ. There's something about that match I love watching. I love the story. Heyman on the outside, I think, makes the match so much better. But I do want to actually mention that Foley match. I know that we're both older now than we were at the time. Do you have a difficult time watching matches like that back? Because I know for me, like those matches get really uncomfortable sometimes watching some of them back. So I just wonder, like, with what we know about CTE and head trauma, do you have a hard time watching those?
The Foley matches, no, because I know the end result and it's kind of a happy ending, right? Like Foley didn't kill himself. Yes, he lost an ear, but so did like Van Gogh. They're both artists and they're amazing. So I can watch back the Foley matches and be like, wow, he took a spear through a flaming table by Edge. You know what? You probably shouldn't do that. Or, oh, this barbed wire match is actual barbed wire. Like, I could watch that, him, Terry Funk, and a lot of these guys and say, you know what? They lived to be like 70 or 80. They had a good life. They're all right. Some of the matches that are weird are watching, like, people who have died already or died at a young age. Watching those Benoit matches. Not like one in particular, but seeing him do the diving headbutt.
Yes.
Where there is no faking. Like, he lands the diving headbutt. Like, on granted, he doesn't hit people in the head. He hits his head on shoulders constantly. Shoulder bone to head, no hands catching himself. And he doesn't hurt his opponent, which is the great part of pro wrestling, right? That's what makes you a great pro wrestler. Your opponent is always safe. But he didn't make himself safe at all in those matches. You see the Eddie Guerreros of the world. And to compete, and he wants it so bad. And he comes from WCW. He's not a cruiserweight. He wants to be that main event guy. So he blows up on roids. And he's twice the size he was in WCW. And then you know his demise when he died. And you just see what these guys risk. And, oh, man, the British Bulldog and all of these guys who give it all. Brian Pillman. And these guys who give it all to just be a top-tier guy. To just be the guy in these promotions, whether they get there or not, to just call themselves a world champion and what they put their bodies through and their minds through, that's scary. And those are the things I find hard to watch, those matches. And the documentaries. I cry only two reasons. I cry when I'm mad, and I cry when I watch sports documentaries because they get me. It's just all the time.
That's all right, though.
I can't watch sports movies or documentaries without shedding a tear. Like I cry during Friday Night Lights, and like any football movie, you're getting me to shed a tear. And sports documentaries the same way. Like I cried like manly thug tears during the Ric Flair documentary.
That was tough to watch.
Like with his son passing, and then him and Charlotte, like that brought a tear to my eye. Rick also saying he drank like 40 beers a day and crazy glasses of wine and everything. I was like, yo, that's crazy. These things bothered me. Those are what get to me. But like, yeah, not the matches where people put their body on the line. Like that's usually cool. It's the other stuff to get your body ready to do that bothers me. The roids, the drinking, the pain pill addictions. Those things are what bothered me.
The one that's been tough for me lately since I've been getting through 2003 of Monday Night Raw is seeing Test. Because, I think that's a name that gets forgotten a lot. And
Did Test die?
Yeah, Test is no longer with us.
Oh, well, I'll be.
Yeah. And, like, I'm watching him in the feud that he had with Steiner and Stacy Keibler. And, like, I didn't realize he was 34 years old when he passed. Like, he was a young man. Like, Test was my age when he died.
Yeah,
and that's one that
34.
Yeah,
can't be
like,
dying at 34.
Yeah, like, that's one that I'm watching now. And I'm like, God, like, this feels just kind of eerie and odd. But I want to get you out of here on one last question. What was the last thing you watched on the WWE Network?
Besides like my weekly shows.
Yeah,
I watch NXT all the time. NXT is literally the last thing I watch. Well, I guess Mae Young Classic.
Okay.
Outside of that, though, like an obscure thing that I watched, it would have to be Bruce Pritchard, Something to Wrestle With.
Okay.
The podcast, obviously, we're on the podcast. I'm a nerd for podcasts as well, and I love the history of the wrestling business, and his insight is second to none. So hearing, how the Montreal Screwjob came together with, Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels and the real inner workings behind the scenes, how people were booked, CM Punk, how no one believed in him besides Paul Heyman and all this. Pritchard has a lot of great insight from backstage, so I binge watched that series.
All right, cool, man. So we're gonna get you out of here. I know it's getting kind of early for you to get out on a Vegas night, but where can people find you on Twitter? Where can people find the Corner Podcast? Let them all know where you're at, and then we'll wrap this thing up.
All right, you guys can follow me at Kel Dansby, KELDANSBY, on all platforms, any social media out there. It's all the same. Real name, no gimmicks. You can find the Corner Podcast on anywhere you guys listen to your music. So you can find us on Spotify, iTunes. I just found out we're on Tidal, iHeartMusic, SoundCloud. That's usually where we blast our stuff from. Make sure you check that out. Me and my co-host Andres Hale from Sporting News and many other outlets. I swear he has 18 jobs. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Andres Hale, his full name. And pretty much you can find my writing work a little bit of everywhere. I still drop in on Black Sports Online from time to time. I work here locally, CBS Las Vegas, which is 8 News Now. And I still have a couple gigs on the horizon, picking up new jobs every day. So it's always fun, man. I appreciate being on the podcast and being able to talk to you for an hour. So it's nice.
Yeah, man.
To get your opinions.
Yeah, it's always a lot of fun when we interact on Twitter, me, you, and I know I'll hit up Andres every now and again. So it's definitely a good conversation. So you guys can check out this episode as well as all other 73 episodes at gullyblanchard.podbean.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Gully Blanchard, GULLYBLANCHARD. Next couple episodes, I'll be talking to Dalvin Nazario from Turn on the Jets. We're going to talk a little bit about Jets football. He ran for local office in Maryland, so we're going to talk about that, talk about some other stuff that's going on with him. But until then, Kel, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was a lot of fun. We got to do this again soon. And you guys all be good this week, and I'll see you guys next week.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.